and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a video for you that contains video material from the last year, showing how I made my foundation pages for my December daily album 2023. I found the video files on my computer and wanted to show them to you because you can still use these ideas for this year or for other albums. This is Story 19. And I love how the page turned out. It was a bit of work, but I really like the idea of using these tags to create the collage. As you can see here, I've already cut out my base page. Unfortunately, I seem to have lost those video files, and I've already filled some of the windows with vellum, which I stamped on or used embossing powder with it. For that, I used the tag stamp set from last year. And you can see how I'm using different leftover pieces of paper that I cut into tag shapes. This was also a great way to use up my scraps, which I cut into these tag shapes to fill up the page. So my main idea was that the page would look like this collage of tags that we saw in last year's main kit, with the windows reserved for photos that I'll stick on the back. Some windows are semi-transparent with the vellum and also include patterns. I had a lot of fun using the stamps, and the rest is meant to be a mix of pattern paper. As you can see here, I already had finished arranging everything and started gluing it down. Additionally, I added some matching embellishments to the tags to make the page look more interesting. I feel like this page comes to life because there are so many different elements to see, and I tried to use pattern papers that are all in the same color family and match a bit. I also managed to use this green floral vellum tag. The pattern on it was really beautiful, and I don't know if you can see it clearly. The cutout windows are actually bordered with green foil, which I thought was really cool. Here is my story 16. For this, I made the strip with trees in the 10x4 size because it was my first year working in a 10x8 album. I wanted to use this page protector configuration and this specific size. For that, I used the tree stamp set from last year and first stamped the large solid color trees on a white sheet of paper. I used slightly thicker paper than regular printer paper, but it wasn't as thick as cardstock. I already picked out a color palette that I wanted to use. As you can see, I'm using 2 shades of green and a very light blue plus a red. Then I used the smaller stamps to create the smaller trees out of special paper. For that, I used colored vellum and also added embossing powder. As you can see here, I first used Versamark and now I'm applying embossing powder.
Fast away, the old year passes. La 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 la. How the new year lads and lasses. La 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 la. Sing rejoice.
Since I only had a small piece of paper cut out, I used tweezers to hold it, which is a great trick to avoid burning your hands. You saw how it melted and now sparkles beautifully. I did the same on red vellum, and now I'm using red glitter embossing powder and repeating the same process as before. And then you saw how I knocked over the container and glitter went everywhere on my desk. I was so annoyed and didn't know how to clean it up because the glitter was literally everywhere. But I eventually managed to get it back into the container and wipe the rest away. Now moving on to the next stamp pattern. This time is a text-based pattern. When using vellum, I like the trick of laying the stamp on the desk and placing the paper on top so I can check from the back whether the special ink has covered everything evenly. And then, by pressing lightly with something flat, you get the best result. Here I'm using white embossing powder on green vellum. My idea was to use the large trees for the back row of trees. They are relatively simple, just solid colored on white paper. And in front of them I wanted a row of special trees that had sparkle or are done with embossing powder on colored vellum. I think the result turned out really cool, exactly how I had imagined it. When working with smaller elements, embossing powder on vellum can be a little bit tricky because it gets a bit static. Even though I used an anti-static tool beforehand, sometimes the powder still sticks and you need to go in with a small brush to clean up the edges. I actually used almost every pattern from the stamp set for the small trees. As you can see, the floral pattern didn't work well with the embossing powder because it was too delicate. I had to adjust my plan and just used regular black ink for the stamp, as I still wanted to include the floral design. Now I'm a step further. I've cut everything out with small scissors. I could have used a silhouette machine, but I did it by hand. I don't know if you noticed with the large trees I'm placing here, but I stamped the bag with a shade of green because you can see the bag through the vellum to the next page. I was a bit clever there and thought ahead to the reverse side. Then I had played around with what arrangement I liked best and temporarily taped everything down with washi tape. I didn't want to use glue on the bag, but rather needle and thread. Since I don't have a sewing machine, I had to sew everything by hand, and I used washi tape to hold the loose trees in place. That way, everything stayed in position, but I could easily remove the washi tape later without damaging the trees. It was quite difficult and time-consuming to sew everything by hand. Not only does hand sewing takes a long time, but you also have to go through multiple layers of vellum and paper and make sure the trees stay in place without shifting. But in the end, everything turned out exactly how I wanted, and I already had prepared 2 chipboard pieces. I wasn't sure yet which story would go there, so I placed both in the page protector as a preparation, along with one tree where I wanted to add the number later. And here comes story 21. I had already prepared it with the text and the story inside, as I talked a bit about my work in general. First, I made this cut file myself and cut it out using the silhouette. These were flip-ups with a little window, and the window had an ornament shape. I planned to glue vellum onto this window, and the vellum had a decoration that I created with last year's silk screens. I simply placed the silk screen on the piece of vellum and used white acrylic paint. Then I double checked to make sure the window was filled with the square pattern. I did this twice because I had 2 windows. I have to say, I love silk screens. The effect of applying paint through them and having the pattern appear afterwards is really cool and adds some texture to the page. Then I added a crease here, so the flip-ups can be easily folded upwards. Next, I attached the vellum on the back, and I had planned ahead to use also the negative cutout from the window for the other side. So when you flip up the page, you don't see the vellum and the adhesive, but instead a pattern paper. I kept everything red and white, used matching pattern papers, and added the red vellum with the white pattern. Next, I stamped some tabs, then you can later lift the flip-ups more easily. I also stamped a little phrase on them, which said these stories. I stamped it upside down because the tabs would be pointing downwards when attached to the flip-up. For that, I used a dark green to introduce a complementary color to the red. And I think it looks very cool, a little pop of color. And then I cut out the tabs with my small scissors and I checked if they fit. I also left a little flap to apply the adhesive. And once I had cut them out, I stamped the same design on the back of the tabs because you can see both sides when you flip the window. Putting everything together was a bit tricky since the tab points outwards, but I still needed to glue the back of the flip up. It was a bit of fiddly work to make sure the flip-up's back didn't block anything. You really had to work precisely to align everything perfectly. But once that was done, I just had to trim a little edge that was slightly crooked and the page was finished. This makes a great foundation page because I only had to add the text and adhere it to the back, and then the page was complete. I really love this ornament shape from last year. It looks so nice, and first I had it cut out of glitter paper and wanted to emboss Make Married on it in white embossing powder. But since it was glitter paper with a textured surface, it didn't work that well because the embossing powder got into every little gap. I had to use a small brush to clean it out. But in the end it worked, and I had already cut out the shape on the silhouette where all the other ornament shapes would fit in. I also added the crease so it could be a flip up and you could attach it with the tab on the side. Then I just had to adhere my pre-made ornament shapes. I had some from the die cut paper pack and one from the main kit, which had a little pocket in the middle where you can stick in some journaling or something like that. After that, I just needed to trim the sides and my foundation page was finished. I hope you enjoyed that video. You can also find a lot more process videos on my channel and my Instagram page. And I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!